Welcome back. You're listening to Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Juliana Vida, the Group Vice President and Chief Strategy Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Now, Juliana, before break, we were talking a lot about the Cyber EO. We were talking a lot about this, if you will, once-in-a-generation opportunity to really try to do more to get ahead of the attackers. So let's talk about the attackers. From your perspective, as you are looking across the cybersecurity environment, the landscape, what are some of those big threats that agencies continually face?
Yep. The two that come directly to mind are poor cybersecurity hygiene. I think people are well-intentioned. Agencies put out requirements about you must do this training, you must do this thing, but it's another task for people to remember to do. And when having good cybersecurity hygiene isn't easy and automated, it often falls off the plate and people forget to do it. And it's those basic, change your password, don't write your password down, those kinds of things, especially in this remote work environment where people are sharing their networks at home and they've maybe gotten a little bit lax because life has just gotten really hard. That cybersecurity hygiene can often be, it's the make or break. It's where a lot of the attacks are still coming in. I had a boss once when I was on the cybersecurity task force in the Pentagon, and he used to get so frustrated because people would talk about all these whiz-bang investments and all this high-level stuff that we were going to do with cybersecurity, and he would say, "Why do we keep trying to fight Delta Force from coming in the roof when the front door is unlocked? Like, let's go there first. Let's change the locks." And he was right 10 years ago, and he's right now. And there's just still too much of that. Go ahead.
Let's just jump in there in a sec. First of all, the whole writing down passwords thing, I have to admit, we all do it, right? And I think that we haven't solved that issue, but I think that's really the challenge of getting toward that identity and access management. We've just so many people are talking about that these days. But is cyber hygiene a matter of, is it a people issue or is it more of a technology issue? There's always both, but where do you kind of lean?
Well, it's all three. It's the people, process, and technology. I mean, not to just oversimplify it, but you could have the greatest the cybersecurity suite in the world, but if your workforce isn't trained how to use it, or it's not easy, or it's not accessible, they're just going to work around it. People are there's too much going on, and especially if they're don't have a level of data literacy to understand their role in keeping information secure, or they figure that's somebody else's responsibility, or surely the IT people will keep me from getting in trouble. All of those things are people and process. Even like I said, if you have the best, you have the strongest investments in cybersecurity. So it has to work together, and it has to be all of agency approach, not just the IT folks, not just the security folks, but everyone, because an infiltrator can come in anywhere. And we're all creating data all day long. We're all sharing data. We're storing it. We're buying it. We're selling it. The level of, in fact, I wish we had a better term than cybersecurity hygiene, because that's just boring and nobody cares about it.
And it's kind of hard to understand when you try and talk to a non-cyber person. Hygiene? I have to be clean?
Yeah, exactly.
The other piece I just want to touch on, because you mentioned two, but let me go back to the hygiene piece for a second, because the automation side, and I think that's key because agencies can't keep up with the threats. So how to get to the point where you're automating the security, how do you get to the point where you're closing the patches when like immediately? And I think that plays into the cloud discussion a little bit, and I'm surprised we've gotten through and haven't mentioned the cloud yet.
Yeah.
So maybe mention it and tell me why the cloud is one answer to that cyber hygiene.
I will mention it.
You will.
Because there are several different value propositions of cloud, as you know. And their speed, the cloud technology can just move faster. Agility can change configuration, can move things around. There's also efficiencies to be found because agencies don't have to be, when you're using cloud technology, you're not managing the infrastructure and paying for all the, the data center hosting and all that kind of stuff. And all of that drives speed, and it allows the speed of the data processing, but also speed for the workforce to be able to do other things, do higher level work than trying to reconfigure passwords, or, oh, I forgot my password, I have to send an email to the help desk, and then they have to respond, I got to put in a trouble ticket. All that stuff you multiply by the millions of workers across the federal government, and it's just a lot of waste. So the more of that technology that can be pushed to the cloud, for the automation capabilities that are available there, and the security. Let's not forget FedRAMP, authorization certification that says gold stamp of approval. This cloud platform or this cloud product is certified for use in the federal government. So the more agencies are moving their workloads to the cloud, the better the cybersecurity hygiene can and will improve.
And the other piece of this that is easy to understand, but maybe something that's worth repeating, is you as Splunk, or if you're pick your partner that you all work with that hosts a cloud, they are incentivized to keep good hygiene.
Yeah.
If they are not, if they have a bunch of 0 days or a bunch of patches that are 30 days, 60 days old, that's going to hurt their market. And so there's, and it's not just the government market, but the commercial market, which is obviously much bigger now than the government market. That's the other piece that maybe agencies need to also keep in mind as they're debating, can this go to the cloud? Can this workload, does it make sense?
That is so true. I'm so glad you brought that up, because often agencies, particularly the larger ones, will say, but we have so much data, we're so special and different, our data needs special protection. Yes, some data does. We all know that. There's levels of secure access and all of that. But the majority of data that's processed across federal agencies is, it's shareable, it's usable by citizens and agencies and across agencies. And we like to remind them, to your point, that what about banks? Don't you think that they care about where their data is going? And well, when they trust cloud technology, you should look at that as maybe a signal that you can trust the cloud. You can trust, you have to do your due diligence to make sure that the FedRAMP certification is there and all of that. But when it is, I would say, stop wasting so much time arguing about why you can't trust it or why you shouldn't trust it. And you can't. Healthcare, insurance companies, banks, as I mentioned, companies that rely on revenue and keeping their brand reputation. Even the intelligence community, they bought into cloud earlier than the rest of the federal civilian agencies. And if they can trust cloud capability, then maybe other agencies should be thinking more about that too.
And you've seen a pretty big increase, and I think part of that is in response not just to the pandemic, which saw the big increase over the last year and a half, but really also the cyber threat. They're seeing that they can get better security through cloud instances. You mentioned there's two. Poor hygiene was one. And your second one?
My second one was...
I know, I'm putting you on the spot.
Legacy technology debt. So agencies have a hard time when they have to figure out where to put their money. They have a limited budget, even if they are, they're fortunate enough to get an award from the TMF or some other funding source, but they have to make puts and takes. They have to make trades. And often those trades are, do I keep these systems running because I cannot afford to be offline? I've got operational data going through this system, can't, stop delivering healthcare, can't stop delivering whatever citizen service. So they have to keep some funding and resources going to those systems. Well, that's money that isn't going towards cloud modernization or a robust data platform or orchestration and automation capabilities. And so we understand, of course, there are trades, but that holding on to the legacy technology is just, it's draining the resources that are needed to move into a modern cybersecurity future. Because back to whether it's cloud technology or not, there have to be some modern, maybe there's some zero trust built into there, but there have to be some modern cybersecurity tools and platforms, or agencies are never going to get to the cybersecurity posture that we know that they want and that they say they want.
I'll be interested to see if OMB reports this number, what the O&M, operation and maintenance versus DME, development, modernization, enhancement, what that number shifts. It was shifted to the right too much, meaning higher on the O&M. And recently you started to see a shift back. I'm wondering if the pandemic has pushed that shift. Are we going to break the 70% to O&M? Is it 69%, 68% government-wide, or what? I don't know if you get a sense of that, but that's the whole, goes back to your legacy investments.
Right. Well, what I have heard, I'm not an expert on the colors of money and what OMB may do or may not do. However, what I have heard recently is that there are starting to be, there already are, exceptions if you're making an investment in cybersecurity, maybe the color of money doesn't matter, or the pot of money that's coming from, which I think is a brilliant and innovative idea. It is not the way the government has operated in the past, because those cybersecurity threats are unplanned, unbudgeted. You know, no one knows when they're going to happen, but when they do, there can't be this, you know, moving and shifting of money from pots to delay the action that agencies need to take to protect our data, to protect their data.
And we saw that urgency several times over the last 15 years. I mean, you saw it with the VA data loss, and you saw it with OPM, and then you're seeing it again through the SolarWinds and the Colonial Pipeline and ransomware attacks. So you see this kind of input. The question is, will Congress change how they deliver the money to say, this is your cyber budget, go make good decisions and tell us what decisions you made, versus here's $1 that has to be put towards endpoint detection response, and here's $2 that has to be put toward log management, and here's $3 that then
Well,
drives
and
agencies
we don't
crazy.
know who can say. However, I will say
Nobody knows.
But there have been a lot of signals over the last year and a half through the pandemic of things Congress is willing to do now that they haven't been willing to do in the past, and other senior leaders as well. You know, it's not just IT people and CIOs talking about we have to do this. The secretaries of the agencies are now involved in the cyber executive order, that they are taking part. Their voices are being heard.
How often, when you meet with your public sector companies, and I'll even go below federal, but if you meet with state and local too, how often are you talking to non-IT people these days? About cyber, but maybe
Not as often as I'd like,
yeah.
but more often than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
How about that? Honestly.
That's a good answer.
It's
Good answer.
Thank you.
answer, good answer.
Leave it at that. Good answer. Good answer. No, it's good to see the cross-functional interest in IT, technology, cybersecurity. It will take a while, but you kind of can't avoid it when the secretaries are getting involved, or the governor. We had one state government that we work with in the Midwest. Their governor is now involved in figuring out, you know, how to better apportion the budget, and you know, being involved in the conversations about which investments to make, and that's huge. Yep. You know, because state governments can be just as large and bureaucratic as federal level.
And that's what's, I mean, when you talk about the threats agencies are seeing, that's also the challenge they see, is getting that other involvement, getting that leadership to buy in. I mean, you saw that when leadership buys in, agencies are much more successful. You saw it at VA with not cyber, unfortunately, but in some other areas. Is that really the biggest remaining challenge? I mean, money aside, technology aside, it's really that culture of leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, without leadership and support from the top across the entire agency, I like to use the DoD because I was in the DoD for 24 years, and that's what I know the best. But if you have a strong, you know, CIO or the 3-star or 4-star whose their responsibility is the network and network protection and all of that, but they don't have the support of the ones who manage the budget for aircraft and submarines and tanks and ground troops, they will get nowhere. So what has been good to see is that at the joint staff level and across the military services and DoD, those admirals and generals are starting to care. They are caring about connected systems, or, you know, connected warriors and JADC2 and all of these things. That has to happen. And every agency has those. There's mission owners, and then there's the rest of the agency. And when those mission owners are getting involved and they're finding out what value there is in leveraging data, leveraging technology, that's when there'll be real change.
That's a great point to end it on.
Thanks.
Because we're out of time.
Okay.
Let me thank my guest. Juliana Vida is the Group Vice President and Chief Strategy Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Juliana, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Likewise, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.